Well, hello, listeners of the Ontological Experience. I guess I should say viewers and listeners of the Ontological Experience. Today, I have a really exciting guest with me. And I'll introduce him formally here in a second, but I just want to tell you who he is now. Many of you will probably recognize him, but this is Bob Dunham, a someone I would consider a pioneer in the ontological coaching, ontological design space. And so I'm delighted to have him with me today. And as I said, I'll introduce him here in a second. But let me tell you where we're headed. And as I always do, or often do, I think it's like we're going to have a conversation. We're going to have an interaction. That's what we're all about here at the Ontological Experience. So for this one, I want to be transparent and talk about how I got here, how this conversation evolved. So Bob and I had a prep call yesterday, and my original intent for the conversation was to talk about capacity management with someone that I consider a capacity management expert. Been working in this realm for decades and has actually implemented the ontological framework and concepts effectively in in at least one powerful instance I know, and he may share more today. So he knows how this stuff works. And the genesis of that was I am preparing for a retreat with a client and was hearing a lot of the same things I've heard for almost 3 decades about priorities and too much change. And then all of that, in my view, leads back to capacity management. So I thought, let me get Bob on here. And I wanted to have a unique conversation, like come at this in a different way than I perhaps ever had before. In a way, what I was thinking was, I don't want to talk about more of the same. So as we got on the prep call yesterday, Bob grabbed that right away. It was like, well, if you don't want to have more of the same, here's where we need to go. And I was like, that's exactly where we need to go. And so where are we going? I think, from my view, the observer that I am, where we're going is to give you a different taste, feel, view of what the ontological experience can be. Meaning, when I started this and I chose that brand, the ontological experience, it's not a singular view, a singular brand. That's the essence of the ontological work, is we're all unique observers and we may see even the word ontological in a different way. And so as I listened to Bob yesterday, I felt invited me into that space. And so I thought, this is the conversation we got to have. We're going to hear about the ontological experience from Bob, someone who's been on the planet a while and who was there in the early days.
Yeah.
Fernando Flores is credited for creating this whole thing. I assume that's accurate. I don't know. And Bob had exposure to Fernando in the very early beginnings of this stuff. And so as you'll hear him talk and experience him, I believe you'll immediately get a sense of like, oh, this is perhaps a more expansive, powerful way to view this thing that Mark's calling the ontological experience. So I think that's where we're headed.
Okay.
And yet Bob's in the mix here too. So I have no idea in some regards where we're headed. We're just going to go where we go. So
Beautiful.
that's
Beautiful.
what you're up for. So let me quote formally introduce Bob. And
Ah,
as y'all know, I don't like to do formal bios. And I found out yesterday neither does Bob. Bob said, "Introduce me from your experience," and I was like, "Uh-oh, you've opened yourself up to trouble there." So honestly, I can't fully recollect Bob the first time we met. I think it was somewhere back in the 2003, 4, 5 range. I got involved with Newfield in 2001, and
yeah.
as I recall, you were a presenter at one of the conferences. I can't remember which one exactly. Might have been '06 in Estes Park. I don't know, but I remember as you were speaking, I was like, "Whoa!" Like this guy's got something. This guy's got something I need to listen to. The way you were speaking about it, but just even the content, it was like, oh. And so I was impressed from the start. And then I remember there was a period in there where I actually went to work for Newfield for a week when they were in Boulder, Colorado. And during that week, you and I had an opportunity to sit down in a conference room. Someone else was there too, I don't remember, but I got to experience you more in person, privately, one on one. And yet again, I was like, man, this guy knows his shit. He really knows this stuff. And I think that's when I began to, you probably shared, hey, I go back to the early days. And so I've had a ton of respect for Bob over the years. I've followed the work that you've been doing with, I know it is the Institute for Generative Leadership, but I think it was actually called something before that might have been, or one of the programs you have might have been called the CEO program, something like that. So I hope it's coming through that I've stalked you on some level through the years, and I've even downloaded your papers and read a lot of that, which just reinforced he's masterful at this framework and how to use it, how it works. And it's not just, from my experience, Bob, an intellectual, logical, rational mastery, because I'll tell you, you were the one that I stole the whole idea of care and committing to what we care about in life. And that has been a central big piece for me this year. I got clear at the beginning of the year about my two cares this year are my health and connection.
Beautiful.
That's what I'm going to focus on committing to. And lo and behold, if that isn't what has happened, either on purpose or on accident, when I declared that in January. So I'm grateful. You also bring, I think you bring the full language, emotion, body dimension to the conversation. So, what else do I want to say in introducing Bob? He now lives in, I think, White Plains, New York. I've always thought
Yep.
he was in Colorado. He has an amazing spouse, Josefina, and he'll have freedom to now share whatever he wants from a bio perspective. But welcome, Bob, to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to have the conversation with you. Let me first of all just congratulate you on your revelation of a care.
Thank you.
And care is one of these awarenesses that we bring to people in the ontological discourse that is not part of our common sense. Most people, when we introduce it, it's like, what you care about matters. Like, oh, really? No one ever
What?
told me that. No one ever thought that was because our culture tends to be totally focused on external action, that you're defined by your external actions. And of course, the whole ontological experience is everything external is generated, shaped internally.
Yes. Yes.
And that's where our humanity lives. And so if we connect to that humanity, questions about what is a human being and what is our humanity get relevant. They're not abstract philosophy or something we go to the mountaintop with. They're something we're living every day, doing every
Yep.
day.
Yep.
So care is one that we have found when we bring it up to people, it grabs you.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you care about matters, particularly when you see that every action you take has to do with some care.
Like an expression of a care.
It's an expression of a care or an expression of your disconnection from your care. You
Fair.
see,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
beings, we have a chance to connect internally and be coherent and take ourselves to the world, or to say, well, I'm going to ignore that internal stuff because I got to be a good machine. I got to look good. I got to do this and that. And so we have all these ways of being that begin to be um, illuminated and present and available for choice when we can talk about them. And care is one
Man.
of those things.
Beautiful.
The other
Beautiful.
thing I'll mention about care, because it has this effect on people, and you just mentioned it, is Fernando, who was the originator of this whole discourse. Um, he used to say, good ontology is when something becomes obvious that wasn't obvious before you were introduced to it.
Wow. I love
But
it.
when you're introduced to it, it's now obvious.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's good ontology. That's powerful ontology.
Hmm.
And so the
Amen.
ontological experience is about bringing to people awarenesses that they don't have that changes their obviousness.
Yeah.
And it's not something we have to learn and remember and, figure out. It's like, okay, I care. I'm not sure I can ever let go of that care again.
Yeah. Yeah. Or
Now it's like,
yeah, or at least, yeah, I think of the language of when you say let go of that care, it's like I can't put my head in the sand anymore about that care.
exactly,
It's present,
exactly. And now and the more you live with, the more you begin to see where it's present
Yeah.
in everything.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good intro to the ontological foundations.
That's a
And
great intro, and I appreciate you using the language multiple times of the ontological experience. That makes me feel good about the name that I've chosen for it. Which just came to me at 5 a.m. one morning as I was wrestling with all this stuff. I honestly consider it divinely given to me, to be quite frank.
beautiful.
Um, what's cool is, I'll probably mess this up, but I showed you my new website, which came up Monday before last, and on the landing page, the expression my copywriter chose was, "When you change the way you see the world, you change everything," I think is the quote. And so I was thinking about that as you were saying, when you become aware of something, good ontology, right, is seeing something you didn't see before, and now you can't unsee it,
Yeah,
It's maybe a
beautiful.
way.
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said. In fact, this metaphor of seeing with new eyes or seeing with new lenses is the popular way to talk about it because it's
Yeah.
something that people can connect to right away. To say
Yeah.
that you have changed your being is like, what the hell is that? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's a
Well,
bit much.
it's fascinating you go there. So let's go there for just a second. Then I want to hear from about your history. You know, and I've been exposed to this stuff for 34 years, and I still wrestle with that piece of like, is the word seeing the word I want to use? Is it observer? Because I
All of
think, yeah, it's like, because way of being is more than visual in what I see, right? It's like, the way I'm speaking about it these days, Bob, is your way of being that has taken shape over time, and in a way is there's probably an entrenched version of language, emotion, body that is your coherence or your congruence. It's the patterned ways in which you see the world, you think about it, you speak about it, you feel about it, and you act in it. And
all
I'm
of it.
still wrestling with that language these days. It'll get changed because then I say to people, I'm just trying to roll up all of what makes you who you are in this moment that affects your experience. Something like that. I
Yeah,
don't know if you have a reaction to that or not. Like,
yeah, you're actually defining the limitations of language. See, we
ah,
use language like we can name things, but you can't name an experience. An experience has an infinite set of variations. So how do you
variables.
describe love? It's harder than hell
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
to, to
Yeah.
have language about love. So we use language to refer to experiences, but we have to go beyond the language. It's not a concept to remember. It's a full
Beautiful.
body experience. And
Beautiful.
so when we talk about being, we talk about it in all these ways because we're trying to provoke the experience of being. Well, the way I think about being these days is when you use the language I am and fill in the blank, that's your being.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what I am. And
Yeah.
then I'm living and it includes all those dimensions, what I see,
Yeah.
what I do, what I feel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
another way I talk about it these days is that one way we can kind of get our heads around being is it's the context we live from.
Mm,
It is our worldview, our sense of ourselves, our embodied experience.
mm.
And uh, when we talk about things like this as a beginning point, let me give it some relevance because when we start out with this, some people can say, "Well, that's abstract. Well, that's what the hell do I do with that?" I'm talking about this because it is the most relevant part of what you see and do in every moment. This is the most practical, powerful view that you have. And so when you spoke about our topic for today, you said managing capacity, capacity management. It's a powerful topic. It's a big breakdown in the world. And the way that we can use this context perspective, this ontological perspective, is capacity management is a conversation that is zoomed in, focused on a particular breakdown, a particular
Yeah.
concern, a particular need for action, and a particular domain of learning.
Yep.
But if we zoom out and say, what's that a part of? And how did this arise? And where did it come from? And what's the kind of observer that sees that? And what's the kind of observer that's blind to that? And what are the consequences? when we zoom out, we begin to see more of these aspects of our being, of the observer we are, the actor we
Yeah.
are. And when we can articulate these different dimensions, um, that I'm an observer, what do I see? But because I'm an observer and see, there's also what I don't see. There's also blindness.
Yep.
How do I know there's blindness? Where I get stuck, I'm frustrated, I'm dissatisfied, I don't know what the hell to do because I can't see what I need
Yeah.
to see,
Yeah. Yep.
right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's super practical. This is
Yep.
not like abstractions. And the problem that we have in our culture today is everybody wants to make it a tool to use.
Yeah.
Your being is not a tool to use.
No.
It is you. And but when you begin, I'll give you one of the discoveries on this learning journey of mine is I was introduced to body and somatics.
Hmm.
And I began to introduce it in our embodiment of leadership as part of our training and leadership. And what I discovered was most people were disconnected from their bodies, not aware of their bodies, not knowing what was going on. Their body didn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Same thing with emotions, because we were trained to be abstract thinkers.
I was going to say the same thing. Yep.
And when you say, "Hey, this is actually going on," it's relevant, it matters. When you get it, then you've expanded your world, you've expanded
Yeah.
your choices, you've expanded your capacity to do things and deal with things that was not available before.
Man, there's about 164 directions I could go. I could
Sure.
go with that. So I'll go to a couple, let you choose or take me wherever you want. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about I'm going to articulate the way I do. I learned about this stuff first from Education for Living seminars and then
Right.
came to Newfield Network. So it's a blend. In Education for Living, one of the primary drawings we had, it was this idea of the eyeball that is looking at this stick figure with this background to it. So we talk about, when I work with clients, I say, I want to help you be a better observer, like the big O observer, you could maybe say, of the little observer that you are. And the little observer is the language, emotion, body coherence, right? And so I don't know if Fernando talked taught that or if Chuck Smith from Education for Living drew that visual. I don't know. Chalmers Brothers, who was my business partner, and I call it the big eye, right? So we're helping people be a better observer of the observer they are, their way of being, which, as you said, you're able to see certain aspects of, let's call it native reality from that way of being. And there are other pieces you just can't see. I think about that. And then I thought about a piece that you said too, which was it's interesting that of the language, emotion, body, the three pieces, I find the same as you that most people are largely unaware or disconnected from the emotional circle and the bodily circle. And we could probably
Absolutely.
talk for days about why that is. I think one of the things that Julio used to say was in the cultural trajectory we've had, we privilege the logical and rational thinking, information, and data, which to me kind of fits in that linguistic language circle. And we want to dismiss the other pieces. So I'm just talking, Bob. I don't know if you have a reaction to any of that.
Oh, yeah, I think your articulation's pretty right on. I started my journey in this ontological discourse in 1981 and did my first workshop that Fernando had designed and later I was so struck by it, I wound up going to everything that he offered from there on. I wound up working for him in 1986, was in his companies until 1993. I was a designer of two one-year programs during that time. That was my training in how to design in this
Mm,
space. And uh, so I would say that that's valid. And everything you've said about what our cultural blind spots are. So this notion of a blind spot is huge. It's super huge because if we go historically, the historical story that we use to kind of makes the example of it, there was a time before we knew germs existed. And then there was a conversation about germs. And then there was Pasteur supposedly discovered germs because he used a microscope. And then he invented vaccine. And the world changed.
Yep.
The world changed because we had a new piece of reality show up called germs.
Yep.
And then these pieces of reality were connected to new practices to produce new outcomes. And
Now,
uh,
can I interject for just a second? Is it fair to
yeah,
say germs were always there?
always.
They just weren't part of we didn't see them or they didn't come on the scene or they weren't part of our reality until that moment in which we go, oh, so it's not like we created germs or invented germs, but they showed up in our world in a way that now expands our repertoire for action, our ability to see, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, you see, you're revealing what the point I'm trying to make is we have blindness.
Yes.
We have a reality around us that we may not see.
Yeah.
Now, the personal uh, edge, the personal point of contact with that is awareness. When you're not aware of something, you have no choice about it. Doesn't exist for you. It could be actually dominating your world, like germs,
Yes. Yes.
but you don't know it exists, and so there's no action because I'm not
Yeah.
aware, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
awareness, what this is the fundamental somatic distinction. So I use the word somatic. You've been speaking of body. I speak in somatic. Somatics means body and mind together.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I like that
So
distinction.
yeah, but when the body shifts, the mind is affected. When the mind shifts, the body's affected. So we talk about somatics, and the fundamental somatic distinction is awareness creates choice. When you're aware
Yeah.
of something, you now have choice of, okay, this
Absolutely.
new thing showed up in my reality. What am I going to do with it?
Yep.
And
Yep.
this is fundamental to the ontological experience because, and everything I've done with generative leadership and other discourses, is that we are creating new awarenesses for the sake of new choices.
Yep. Yep.
It expands your world, it expands your possibilities, new choices.
Yep.
And then it takes you to that coherence you were talking about. If I have new choices, I am now a beginner in new actions.
Yeah.
I am now confronting my embodiment for how do I notice this? What assessments do I make about it? What behaviors is this calling me to? How
Yeah.
do I have to give up old ideas and old habits to create new behaviors? And this
Yeah.
is the learning path of the ontological experience to see the
Yeah.
world with new possibilities and build the body of competence to be able to make new choices to realize those new possibilities.
You remind me of how I've been speaking about coaching when I talk to prospective new clients. You remind me of a couple things. One is how do you, like some people that are listening to our conversation might the observer they might say that's some woo-woo shit. Like I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I have found that one of my gifts is to be able to take this and translate it into stuff people understand really quickly. You
Yeah.
know, and by examples. Have you ever had this? Have you ever feel like, oh yeah, like that's what I'm talking about. But when I talk about coaching with prospective new clients, I often just say, look, in many ways, we're coaching is learning. So we're entering a learning journey together. I'm your learning partner, as cheesy as that may sound. And usually I'll say, typically that has two parts. The first part is always about expanding your awareness.
Right.
And so and I'll talk about how we do that. There's a number of different ways, but and then I say, that'll create aha moments, paradigm shifts. You ever had an aha moment there? Like, yeah, I think that's what I'm talking about, right? I'm gonna make aware to you something you don't see now. And then we got to put that into practice. So it's kind of awareness and practice. And to me, both involve the body. And yet I
Yeah.
would say that when we talk about embodied learning, my assessment is in general that happens through the practice, through the repetition of whatever has shown up in the new awareness. I don't know. I'm just again, uh, it's cool that it's really cool talking to you about because I feel validated in so much of who I am and what I've been doing for so long, and it's fun to just talk about it with a fresh observer.
Yeah, it when you talk about making this relevant for people in the coaching conversation, the first step is what I call the relevance conversation.
Mm,
Why does this conversation matter? Why does this distinction matter? I'm not
yeah.
here to like throw stuff at you and you have to take notes for a quiz. No,
Nope.
this is, it's always going back to you and I are talking about this stuff not because it's cool abstract stuff that the few arcane people that get into this enjoy. It's because every one of these distinctions applies to every human being walking the planet, ever has walked the planet, never will. That's what the ontological discourse is about. What's a distinction that is part of creating reality that you may not notice, you may have been blind to, but when you see it, you say, damn, this is part of reality. And
Yeah.
the fact that we care as a human being, part like, okay, can't leave it out now. What am I
Nope.
going to do with it? Most people take a long time to like get a hold of it and explore it because they haven't been hanging out there. We don't teach our kids that what they care about matters. We teach our
Yeah.
kids what you care about doesn't matter. Do what I tell you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
That's the common sense. One of the pieces of common sense I think you're speaking about. So
yeah.
your your video is frozen for me. There you go. You're moving now a little bit. It's fine. We'll just keep on. Your audio's fine. Uh,
Okay. Very
but I
good.
want to. It's why I did the YouTube channel. I had an audio podcast for a year, and that's like I want to add video. I want people to
Cool.
see the coherence, right? Where do we go next?
Want me to do the history?
Yeah, do some history, and then maybe if it makes sense to talk about your Motorola experience related to that.
Well, it's part of my history. As I mentioned, I started my journey in this ontological discourse and discipline in 1981. And I was uh, in my work life, I just been made a program manager in Motorola Computer Systems, and uh, it was actually called Forfait. So Motorola acquired the company later, and it was an organization that was in free fall. They had invented a computer that was really dynamite in doing data entry, high volume data entry. And they had built a $300 million company, 5,000 employees, kind of rocking it. But then they kind of ran into the wall of how do we improve the product? How do we evolve the product? How do we keep the product competitive? And they began to falter. They began to fail. And um, when I was there, the turnover rate of people leaving the company was reaching 40%
Wow.
for the year, which meant people were bailing because they could see we weren't going anywhere. And the fundamental place that things were locked up was in the product development area where I worked. And so I I was kind of in the phase of my life where I was finding my voice and I was
Beautiful.
beginning to take a stand for things in conversation. And I began to talk to people about why are we committed to excellence here? Why are we always bitching and complaining and things aren't happening?
Yeah.
And because I had that big mouth, they brought in a new VP to do a turnaround of the development organization. And 2 months later, he said, well, why don't you take over the program manager role? I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I said, well, me and my big mouth, I guess I've got to step up here. So he made me program manager, which meant I was in charge of the planning and execution of 250 engineers working on 35 products with 22 managers and
There
six.
you go.
And I had to move that process forward without anybody reporting to me.
There you go. No authority but influence.
Exactly. Well, it turned out to not be influence. I think influence is a really shadow. It's like it's like weak coffee, it's not influence. It's commitment. So
Yeah. Yeah.
what I wound up doing there is my first experience was okay, me and my big mouth. At that time, there was a poster that I noticed in shops of a kitten with its claws hooked on a string, hanging
Hmm.
with a kind of like, and I said, "That's me. I'm, I'm. How did I get here? What do I do
Ah,
now?"
yeah.
And so at that time, I was looking around. I interviewed people saying, "How do I do this job? Tell me, what do I need to learn? Where do I go?"
Hmm.
Nobody had any advice. I
Hmm.
interviewed people with MBAs, and I said, well, "MBA, will that help me do this job?" And they said, "No, no, it's not about leadership. It's about business models." And okay. So I interviewed all the directors, and their sage advice was, good luck.
Yeah.
And,
So you still
and
felt like the cat, like, ah.
yeah, and I knew a little bit about, doing project management, but that seemed kind of limited. And then I ran into Fernando's workshop, his first workshop that he put out called Conversation for Action. And I said, I think this is relevant because the hallway talk in the company was we don't communicate around here. So I went to this workshop and they proceeded to open up early and ask the question, what is action? And I go, what? What a
What
weird
do you mean?
question.
What is action? It's obvious what action is.
Yeah, it's like we're all doing action. And then I slowed down. I said, well, I'm not exactly sure how I would say it, but I could talk about action. And then I had this realization that everybody in the room probably had a similar reaction to me. Weird question. I could probably talk to it, but am I really sure that I know what action is? And at that moment was my first experience of being aware of a blind spot.
Hmm.
Not only my blind spot, but a blind spot of our culture.
Hmm.
Well, and the relevance was, I bet this has something to do with why my company is screwed up. We don't
Yep.
know how to do action well.
Yep. Yep.
And they proceeded to give an answer to that question that I would never have come up with. It was one of these new illuminations, a new ontological answer to something fundamental. By the way, what is something is a basic ontological question.
Hmm.
Most people in our culture want to go to, well, how do I do leadership? Like
Yeah.
they know what leadership is, and all you got to do
Yeah.
is know how. Like,
Yeah.
no, you have to answer what it is before you can answer how to do it.
So
And
what it is pointing at the being of it. Doing is pointing at the action of it.
exactly the reality of it. And
Yep.
so they proceeded to say that action is commitment. And I went, what?
Huh?
uh, and and then we proceeded to have exercises where we say, okay, make an agreement with someone to do something, and you saw that the person could be committed, could be not committed. They could say yes, they could no, say no. You could believe their yes or not believe it. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, I saw number one, this made sense. That what someone was going to do was based on their commitment. And this was a revelation because now I have to be aware of an internal state of people, which I
Yep.
actually am aware of because I'm
Yep.
listening all the time already,
Yep.
but I wasn't paying attention to commitment
Yep.
in my work conversations. I was just getting people to say yes. But because I wasn't paying attention to commitment, I didn't really know if I had a good yes.
Can I interject with something real quick that you reminded me of?
Yeah.
I'm gonna butcher it, but remember the meeting I talked about when I met you in more in person in the conference room. You
Yeah.
said something, clean this up for me, but it was a new awareness. It was a blind spot that all of a sudden was like you were like, commitment doesn't live in the speaker's words or what the speaker is saying. It
No.
lives in my listening of whether they're committed or not, or something like that. It's like you flipped it for me because at that point I was always listening for the commitment in their language, their word choice. Yes, I'm committed. But there's this other more powerful piece of like, I hear you saying that, but my listening of you, of your internal state is you're not really committed.
So I'm going to ask you to do something right now. We'll
Oh,
demonstrate what we you just talked about. So I want
okay.
you to tell me, I promise and mean it. Tell me that.
Like something I really mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, shit, Bob. I'm
Just
drawing a
say the two
blank.
words. I promise. And
Oh,
mean it.
just that. I promise.
Yeah. Say it.
I promise.
Okay. Now, I want you to tell me I promise. And internally you're saying, I ain't going to do this. Say
Oh,
it.
I promise.
And guess what? I listened something different. This was the exercise in that first weekend that I said, oh my God, not
Yeah,
only
yeah,
is it
yeah.
commitment, it's in the listening, and the promise was not in your words. It was in my
Yeah,
listening of what was behind, of the commitment behind the words. And so let me tell you the pragmatics of this.
please.
I go out of this weekend workshop inflamed with this new awareness and said, oh my God, this blind spot that I never saw before, that I didn't know where the action came from. And I have this frickin' disaster company. I have to try and turn around a track record of 2.5 years of failure into 250 people. And I said, and it is the conversation. So what am I going to do as a leader? I'm going to have conversations to get real commitments.
There you go. There you go.
And I learned enough in this weekend, commitments you can trust. It's not enough to be committed. People can be committed to fantasy. So we
Hmm.
have to have not only commitment, we have to have good judgment around the commitment. So
Yeah.
I learned those two things in this weekend. I went to work on Monday and I practiced. The way I embodied this was every, I used as the trigger of my practice. Every time there was a conversation, I'm listening for commitment.
Wow. Cool. Cool. Yeah,
Every
that's practice.
conversation, every
That's
conversation.
that's practice.
And my job was to have the conversations so that commitments you can trust were made inside this organization. How did this work out pragmatically? We had a document this thick from sales and marketing saying, this is what you need to produce for us to sell. I went back to the managers and said, you're not going to say yes automatically because that's how we got into this problem. Everybody was saying yes to everything and nothing happened. Everything was an excuse.
Hello. That's still the predominant, not the predominant, but that's still very pervasive, I find, in a lot of the clients that ask me to
Exactly.
come help. So
Exactly. And so my job was to, well, and I made it clear to my managers, your job is to say yes and no. What can you really do? I'm holding you accountable. And here's the game. I'm expecting what you commit to, we are going to fulfill. If you need help, I'll help you. Do you have the right team? Do you have the right resources? Do you have the plan? We're going to do our due diligence. But I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to be committed to your commitment. When you say yes, if you didn't make a good commitment, have to come in nights and weekends, we're going to do that. So use prudence, use your professional judgment, and make good commitments. We said yes to about half.
yep,
And that's where we had to go to sales and marketing and said, hey, we're totally committed to support you, but we can't do everything. You have to prioritize.
yep.
And so I was able to have that conversation. I taught the organization to request priorities, say yes and no, hold ourselves accountable. And guess what? We delivered all 35 products on time, on budget, 10 times higher quality than had ever been achieved before in 6 months
Because you're committed.
because we had new conversations, not because I was a special leader, but
No, no,
because
no.
we were doing the actual necessary act of coordination that
Yeah, yeah. So I got to ask a few questions. So this is just curiosity. What was sales and marketing's reaction when you went back and said, "Hey, look, we can only be committed to 50% of what you want." I want to hear about that. And more broadly, I would say I would language it as like you learned how to have new conversations and all of that, but you also trained the whole organization how to change their conversations in a way that equaled commitment,
yeah,
something like that.
so your first question, they were not happy.
I bet.
They wanted to complain, and I just said something very simple. We don't have infinite capacity. The fact you make a request does not mean I have a promise. We are using our professional judgment. This is our best professional judgment. And at that point, I was confronted with a moment of saying, hey, they may fire me because I'm not playing the game of yes to everything. And
Bingo.
I came up with, how am I going to respond to that fear? And I said, you know what? If they want to fire me for that reason, I don't even want to be here. So that's a non-issue. So I'm going to take a stand for trustworthy promises, for doing the negotiation. And I did. And because there had been 2.5 years of failure, they didn't they didn't attack me. They said, "Okay, we got a guy who's playing the game here, and we haven't had a good game yet, so let's see how he does."
Got it.
And we frickin' delivered.
Yeah. We could go way down this tunnel. I Yeah, they were more receptive because they saw, for 2 years we're not producing the results we should. So they probably
Right.
were more open to the conversation. But I want you to talk about it. I use the phrase, Bob, emotional strength. You used fear. Fear came to me as an emotion. My assessment is a lot of people that would have been in your shoes when they think about going to sales and marketing and basically telling them, we can't do what you want us to do. That elicits, there's a lot of fear, anxiety, whatever there. So they often will talk themselves out of that conversation. So they don't get the practice of sitting in that discomfort and mess of having that conversation. Therefore, they don't build their emotional strength. So it's like it feels to me like there's an over and over again opportunity to expand or increase your emotional strength that people are missing. I suspect you coming out of Fernando's workshop, you grew your emotional strength. Big Mouth Bob, I'll call him, grew his emotional strength a lot over that time. Or would you say you already had that and it was just dialing the language in with it? What do you say to that?
Well, a couple of things. One is I would say that it's emotional strength is secondary.
Okay.
The primary strength is commitment strength.
Okay.
When you're faced with fears or reactions, I call them edges. Edges show up. Uh, then you have a choice. You have a choice to act from your commitment or from the reaction, the emotional reaction.
Hmm.
And when you choose to act from the commitment, which is what I did, in spite of the emotional reaction, the emotions begin to alter out of that process. You begin to find, oh, I said no and they didn't kill me. I guess I'm still breathing. My
You
body
survived
did
it. Yeah.
something here because it thought I was going to disintegrate. And so the way that I have supported people in generative leadership is the key skill here is what we call centering. It's a term drawn from martial arts. Is you configure your body, your emotions, your language based on your commitment, not on your reactions, not on your fears.
I like that. I
And
like that way of
that's
speaking.
and the body learns through that process.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
become more and more centered, and because you're always going to have the triggers that they're not going to go away.
Nope.
You
Nope.
can be emotionally strong and still be terrified, but it's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
being able to take that big breath and come back to center, come back to to find center is to find choice. And then with choice, you can act from commitment and deal with
Ah,
produce with all the threats that you see.
yeah. Yeah. Love it. Thank you. I love that language. Gives me, gives me some thoughts. I'd love to ask, I could ask 10 more questions, but I'll leave that alone for the moment. So you said like we delivered, I think you said 35 products. We were successful. Like you turned that whole division around. Um, Talk about what's my question here, Bob? I give me a little latitude here to set this up. I teach it and call it the cycle of the promise. I think it's also called the conversation for action, where we have the customer and performer roles, and then there are the different phases, if you want to call it that, of those conversations. I think breakdowns can occur in any or all of them, which
Correct.
affect our ability to execute and stuff. I'm thinking for some reason right now a lot about the what I would call the negotiation phase. Like once the request is made and the performer's capacity or ability to negotiate around that. Is there a, and I haven't explained the whole thing. Uh, there are other phases, but is in your experience, was much of the work was there one phase that demanded more work and effort and change in your process of instilling that whole set of concepts and really helping it become embodied in the conversations of your business unit?
Yeah, before I answer that, let me go to your use of the language cycle of the promise and
I figured you probably would.
conversation for action. Um, the word cycle of the promise came from a later development in the mid 80s.
Okay.
It was about 1988. I was still working for Fernando, and the big rage in the business world was business process redesign.
Hmm.
And so what we did was we took the structure of the conversation for action and said, this is actually a cycle of coordination. And when you see it that way, it actually applies to the interactions of a process of how machines interact. And so
Yeah.
it became the cycle of of a, of a, of a promise, of a commitment to an outcome. And that there was a whole group of people who were trained in this business process redesign method using the cycle of the promise. And I've seen it kind of the ripple effect has been using that terminology.
Okay.
I think using that terminology with people is a mistake.
Okay.
I think when it's people, it's a conversation. It's a full embodied human interaction it's not some abstract process or cycle
Yeah.
that that does make sense in non-human aspects of
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just want to say, weigh in like if you go back to the conversation, then you go back to listening and body and emotion
Yeah.
and all that stuff that's appropriate. So given that, what was your question again after?
Well, let me say something first because once again, you evoke something. I'm an electrical engineer by training, undergraduate. That's my
Me,
bachelor's
me
of
too.
science. So I was thinking, like, I love that distinction, cycle versus conversation, because I use both.
Yeah.
But to me, cycle is like we're talking about an Allen Bradley programmable logic controller and programming it and the cycles that it runs through versus humans, which is like human conversation, listening, speaking, emotions, body, all that stuff. So
Look, this is super, super important because the common sense about action in our world today is mechanical.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Everybody goes to act, it's external, it's you do the thing, you got the black box, you do the thing, and everybody turns people into little black boxes to produce
yeah, yeah,
outcome. And the human being is left out in that view. We leave out the body and the
yes,
emotions,
yeah.
and
It's so
leadership becomes
entrenched.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so,
So what was my question? My question, let me rephrase my question. In the conversation for coordination of action, the diagram that I've seen called the cycle of the promise has four labeled phases. We call it the way I've seen it's preparation phase, negotiation phase, fulfillment phase, and the satisfaction phase, or the labels.
sure.
Is there and phase is just some series of humans having conversations and responding and reacting. This diagram is much more complex than that. Is there, so my question was pointing at, is there a phase in which these conversations occur that you found, like maybe the negotiation phase was where people were struggling the most and that was where a lot of the work had to be done? Or, yeah, that was kind of my question. I was just curious, like, is there any one phase that seemed to be more important than the other?
Well, let me answer it in two different ways. My first answer is all four phases have to function appropriately in order
Yep.
for a an outcome to be produced that's satisfying. And so we have all four phases. But where is the learning edges that show up? Let me talk about the four phases. And if I were to emphasize one for the beginner, it would be the negotiation. But before negotiation, you have preparation, you have developing. How do you start an action conversation? An action conversation is a conversation that's going to produce a promise about action. It's the human part that precedes external behavior. And so in that first phase, you are coming up with, well, what's the right outcome to ask for? What's the relevant request?
Yeah.
We call the content of a request a condition of satisfaction.
Yep. Yep.
What is it? And uh, I want to emphasize this because we find most people in leadership positions are there because they've been super performers.
Yep.
And then they define what we talk about based on what I'm expert at, which is the past.
Yep.
And to invent conditions of satisfaction to create a new future is a big learning edge, even for very experienced leaders. A big
Yep.
deal.
Yep. Agree.
But for beginners, the conversation of negotiation, of making a request, uh, making the room for the performer who's being asked to perform to be able to say no,
Yep.
be able to counteroffer, to be able to have a voice. That's a big deal. Most people in performer roles don't do that very well.
Nope.
There haven't been environments that supported it.
Yep.
Uh, so what I learned when I kicked this off was I wanted a trustworthy promise. So I really supported my performers. You can say no. You can come back with a better answer. We got to have something that we can really count on because once we
Yep.
agree, this is going to kind of
Yep. Yep.
kind of focus
Yep.
what our relationship's going to be. So in that back and forth, there's a skill. This we call it the self, the SELPH, somatics, emotions, language, practice, and history. The self,
SELPH. Interesting. Okay.
yeah, that self, the conversation is happening in a self, an embodiment. And the embodiments are two different people. Listening is happening, and you're making a request, and the performer has to be encouraged to what's the appropriate answer from the commitment perspective you have. And so do we make it safe to be honest? Are you supported in listening to your assessments? Because I learned that one of the huge breakdowns in leadership that's producing a lot of waste and suffering in the world is people get into leadership positions and say, my job is to get people to say yes. That's a disaster.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Your job is to get people to make trustworthy promises. That's a whole different conversation.
Yep.
And so I understood that, and I coached my performers. Here's how you can say it, and I would listen beyond the words. I would listen to their hesitation, to their doubt, to the and say, "Oh, is there something there? Do you need help with? Do we need to go in?"
Yep.
This wasn't me policing or bullying. This was me helping someone through a conversation that was going to create a piece of the future that we were both going to have to be committed to. And
Yeah.
so I really wanted to help them come up with their best answer, even if it was a no. No was a rarity, but that was kind of the extreme of courage for people. Uh, Usually, when you can't do something, you can say, "Oh, I can't do this, but I could do something else," which we call a counter offer,
Counter offer.
and so that works. So I had to manage my own role as we every conversation for action creates two roles in the conversation: the customer who's making a request and the performer who's making a promise in reply.
Yep.
But it's a co-creation.
Yep.
And what I was very lucky with was I had the background when I was introduced to this to be emotionally sensitive enough and somatically sensitive enough and clear enough that I needed commitment inside the other person to help with the conversation without it being me trying to squeeze something from them. And that was a new experience in my organization. Most people just said yes because there was no
Yep.
other option on the
Yep.
menu.
Yep.
I gave them a new option. You can say yes, you can say no. And so we wound up doing It wasn't necessarily time consuming, but it was a shift of context that I had to hold people through.
Yeah.
And this did something that uh, was key to the whole game. In that negotiation, you're not simply saying who asks and who replies with customer performer. You are defining roles of how you're going to play afterwards.
Hmm.
How does the customer who's committed to your success and relying on your success play through the process of execution and breakdown that's coming?
Yep. Yep.
How does the performer play in managing the satisfaction of the customer through the process of execution and breakdown?
Yep.
And so it wasn't just the negotiation. Then we had to play it through the execution phase
Yep. Yep.
and then have that honest conversation at the end around, are you satisfied?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. It has become clear to me that this is not the only time we're going to have to talk about this.
Okay.
If you're open to talking more, because there's so much here. Um, but I love the way you eloquently give the broader picture of it, because you're triggering so much in me to want to ask, what about this? What about that? Here's what I notice. Here's what I see, all of that stuff. So I'm
Great.
mindful.
Oh, I've enjoyed it.
Let me close with a softball question,
Sure.
tactical. Are you open to coming back and us diving deeper into this conversation?
I love this conversation. Love to. Thank you for the
Okay,
invitation.
beautiful. Beautiful. We'll do this. So the softball question was from the time you walked out of Fernando's workshop inflamed, as you call it, which I love that, to the time you saw the delivery on these 35 products, what is that duration?
Uh, that period of time was a little less than 6 months.
Wow. See, I thought you were going to say 3.5 years. And
No, six.
so 6 months.
That's because the conversational space is going on. I happen to have a role where I got to play customer to all these promises from 22 managers and their 250 engineers. And because I was the customer, I was able to inhabit the role of I'm going to find the conversation space that we're going to do this in.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you disagree with that, let's you and I go talk to your boss's boss, who happens to
Yeah.
be mine.
You
And
disagree, we're having a different conversation.
exactly. And I never had to go there. So they took me seriously, and I was able to
Beautiful.
coach them in how to have these coordination conversations, both in the original agreement and through the process. And I found the power of being able to shift the conversational space. And I happened to have a role where I could do that. And I happened to have a body that had been trained somatically through sports. I served in the military, that I had a body that knew how to hold what we have come to call the we space.
Hmm.
And so I was fortunate that those
Yeah.
factors came together. But I demonstrated that when you can be the coach and choreographer of a coordination space, it can shift remarkably huge network of conversations
In a relatively quick time.
in a
Yeah.
relatively
So
time.
then I got to ask one more softball question. I got to say something, which is like I've always thought, the leader, let's use this language, bears more responsibility of the customer in a leadership role, bears more responsibility for the transformation of all of this, and but I'm curious about just a general overall assessment on your part, because I assume that that's what you do now is you go into organizations and you help leaders do what you did. Is there, and I'm sure up front you're making assessments about their readiness for it and their ability to do it and all that stuff, but once all those are met and you get in there, what's your general sense of what's possible these days? Because most leaders probably aren't going to have the body you had, the history you had, all that stuff, or maybe they do. But what's your general sense of that time arc for significant turnaround? I'll use that.
Well, you're absolutely right. It depends on the individual. Everybody's got a different set of histories and skills and strengths and so forth. Um, uh, in the Institute, I originally did 3-day workshops saying, I'm going to transform your life and your world in 3 days. And all,
Guilty.
yeah, it didn't happen. And I said, oh shit, what's missing here? So I wound up offering a 1-year program, and we had some notable progress, but I said there's still stuff missing here. So I began to see that everybody's life path is unique,
Yep.
that there are certain fundamentals of the coordination space that are non-discretionary. You have to
Mm.
learn. You have to be able to make requests. You have to be able to listen. You have to be able. This is not discretionary. If you don't do that, you're not going to coordinate. And so the experience I've had is all this variation of the diversity of people, what it takes to go into this conversation space. Right now, the Institute has a 3-year program that's designed for full people working full time to
Okay.
give them the chance to find what are the learning edges that they're working on, develop these fundamental embodied skills, but then take them on to learn the in the generative leadership, we have defined the conversation that makes a team, that makes a strategy, that is value creation of uh, designing a good life. And so we've managed to unpack a whole discipline of conversational spaces that for most people are new, step by
Yeah.
step. But if you grow the foundational listening, connecting, coordinating, you can go to bigger and bigger promises in the world that you would do because you care.
Are are you so one last follow-up question. Are you primarily getting individual leaders that come through that 3 month program, or are you actually taking full teams through that 3 month 3 year experience? I'm sorry.
Where we wound up is our public programs tend to have individuals show up, and when we work with teams, we tend to do in-house customized work.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And do you still bring that 3 year template into that with that team? Or I
It's
suspect it's probably tailored in some regard.
it's tailored, it's the menu. And
Yeah.
and based on what I've learned about how long it takes for people to enter a new conversation and practice it and embody it, that 3-year curriculum should probably be 5 years just to stretch out the
Yeah.
time to and and when people hear these time spans, they go, "Oh my God, I." But that's the blind spot of our culture that says leadership should be a weekend workshop.
I know. I know.
And I think leadership is a profession. It's comparable to being a physician
Yep.
or a lawyer.
Yep.
And just like those, you do serious learning and then you go into practice where
Yep.
you're evolving and refining over your entire
Yep.
career. I believe leadership is the same.
Yeah. I agree with you. I love the way you express that. Hadn't heard it said that way before, but I absolutely agree. So to close, what you're basically saying to me is this retreat that I have coming up with a client, I better not promise in my 3 hours out of the 4 hours that I can flip and turn their whole organization to do what you did at Motorola.
What you can do is create a breakdown for them around their blind spot so that they might be perturbed enough to pay attention to what really needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well
can't,
said.
yeah, yeah, it's like you going to the gym. You're not going to do that in 4 hours.
Nope. No,
You're going to
it's
have to take
exactly what I'm
time and practice.
that's exactly what I'm letting sort through me between now and then is like, how do I do that? How do I produce a breakdown and perturb their system enough that they go, I want more of that, you know?
Uh, and an invitation to possibilities that are real. When they see that, they'll want it.
Now, if they say yes to that, then I'm calling you because I
Okay.
need more than me to deliver on the promise I'm going to make. So I'm calling you and your team from,
Well, hell, we'll have a good time, and that's what we're about. That's what we want to give people.
yeah, we'd have a great time for sure. Bob, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
As we say yesterday, I had no idea where this conversation was going, but I love it. It's fantastic. And as I said earlier, just to start, if you're open to more, would love to have you back on in the future. But thank you for today. It's been a joy.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Yeah, appreciate it.